Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Okay. Again, welcome everybody in. My name is Steve Sheik, and I'm the rabbi, the chief cook and bottle washer, and congregation leader at Tree of Life Messianic Congregation in Katy, Texas, and which is on the west side of Houston. Most of you already know that because you already attend our congregation, but there's a lot of people that watch and listen remotely, and they wouldn't know that. So anyway, good to have you with us tonight as we go chapter 21, the Oracle against Babylon. And we're right about in here with this, the book of Isaiah. And as far as a time frame, again, we're right about in this area here, 701, 700, something like that, of the Isaiah's timeline. And on this one, I guess I probably needed to move it because it's 7:10, and I probably need to put it down here to like 7:1 or something like that. But it's some of the prophecies jump back and forth, so that they're not exactly in chronological order. So I think that's all right. This just kind of gives you an idea of kind of where we are with the class. All right, and then here we're going to be looking at this one here, the desert by the sea, which is Babylon, and then we'll go down here to the silence of Edom, and then the evening, and that's Arabia, and then we'll get into the rest of the oracles. So next week we'll start with that valley of vision, which is Jerusalem. All right, and first of all, any comments or questions that anyone may have from last week or in your studies of this week? If you had any comments or questions before we actually get started. Okay, I don't see anybody, their hand popping up. All right, so starting out with, I wanted to show you some of the things that we're going to be looking at and alluding to tonight. And I don't know if you were ever familiar with what they call the Akkadian Empire, which was pretty much the very first world empire, and followed closely on its heels by the Assyrian Empire. But this was the Akkadian Empire right here in this Fertile Crescent area. And Akkad is mentioned early on in the book of Genesis. And so a lot of these places, they still, they're actual ruins that people can go and look and see. And the Akkadians came pretty much out of this area here of the Sumer and the Sumerians, not the Samaritans, the Sumerians, and then after them, following closely on their heels, then we saw the extension then of the Assyrian Empire. Now, the Assyrians and the Akkadians spoke pretty much a single language. All the people pretty much in this green area here would have known and would have spoken a common language, a lingua franca of Akkadian, they called it. And so they would have understood each other, and basically all the people in this area here that that made up the majority of Assyria were ethnically very, very close. They'd been those people had been there for eons, and however long there's been people in that area, there were some people there. So anyway, just to kind of give you a background of what that looked like in Isaiah's time frame. All right, so chapter 21, verse 1, Isaiah, the burden of the desert by the sea, as windstorms sweep over the south, so it comes from the desert, a terrifying land. All right, so this area, this desert by the sea, when you get to studying that one, it is well, one author said that it's enigmatic at best, and so other words, we don't really know what it means, and not clearly anyway. They got some ideas as to what it might mean, but the southern part of Mesopotamia, I think they called it the sea land, and possibly why that was is because at one point the rivers of the Euphrates and the Tigris and so forth, they would overflow their banks, and then they dammed up a lot of that river, and it formed lakes out there in this desert. And so for many, many years, then that area had a lot of water, and they called it the sea land. And so, but it was smack in the middle of a desert. And then later on, when Cyrus captured or defeated Babylon, they went in there and destroyed those dams that had been built, and the land reverted back to desert. It was a way of that Cyrus was basically it's a burned earth idea, kind of like Sherman going through the South. Scorched earth, that's what I meant to say. Scorched earth kind of thing, that he was destroying his enemies. So this desert by the sea is not really totally clear, but that may very well be what they're talking about, because that does fit in with Babylon then. All right, so the windstorms. If you've ever lived or worked in the Middle East, and I have put my time in the Middle East over the years, and the windstorms that can come up through there they're as bad as anything I ever experienced living out in West Texas. In fact, maybe they're even worse, because it's hotter there than it is in West Texas. But these windstorms would come through, and they can be terribly ferocious, and to the point of even killing people by burying them in sand. I mean, it's that ferocious, and where they'll lay down to try to get out of the wind and keep from getting sandblasted, and then the wind just covers them up and they suffocate and they die. But that's what those storms can be like. And so I think what Isaiah is trying to say here is this stuff is really bad. This vision that I've got now is just as ferocious and just as bad as any kind of windstorm that all of those people out there in that part of the world would recognize. Now, Leonard asked a question: was Israel around in 2051? No. The nation of Israel was not actually a thing until around 1400 BCE. That's when Well, 1446 is when Israel, the exodus from Egypt occurred. And then, of course, they wandered around for 40 years. So, and then they had 7 years of battle in Canaan. They crossed over into Canaan about 1406 BCE, and it took it 6 or 7 years. So it's right around 1400 BC that Israel then became the nation of Israel. And even then, they were still a collection of tribes. They were divided along tribal lines, and they never really then became the nation of Israel until they got a king under King Saul, and then under David and so forth. But that would have been then around 1000 BC when under King Saul, that Israel was kind of subdued. Everybody was then under one king, but certainly Israel was not around in 2150 BCE. Okay, I hope that answers your question. And so going on, the weather patterns, when the Bible is talking about where it's talking about it, so it came from the desert, comes from the desert. Well, that's the south and the southeast of Israel, and that's where the windstorms will come in from. That the prevailing wind, it comes in, sweeps up, and then it goes up north. So what this is trying to convey was that there is going to be a sudden, breathless doom that is coming across the land and into Arabia and Babylon, that whole Middle East area. And it can actually include, this prophecy can also include Israel itself, not just Babylon and the surrounding countries, because it would be hard to separate that out, Israel, from the rest of them when there's massive sandstorms coming through. All right, so the verse 2, a harsh vision has been shown to me. The traitor betrays and the plunderer plunders. Go up, Elam, besiege Media. I have put an end to all her groaning. All right, so again, this particular chapter is one of the most difficult to understand. I mean, it is. I can't remember what Churchill said about it's a mystery wrapped in an enigma or something like that. But there's a lot of stuff here that we just don't know, and as you'll see here, that the scholars have different ideas, and so I just kind of put them out there as to what people might have thought. This severe vision speaks of the events that the prophet foresaw, and he because he prophesies doom and bloodshed does not mean that he delights in it. In fact, he does not at all. He's a very sensitive prophet, and he was aware of what God was saying to all these people, and he empathized with the human tragedy that he could see coming, and that his prophecies predicted. And so he was very much an empathetic prophet, and maybe not so much like some of the more bombastic kind, like Elijah, perhaps. So, but Isaiah was chosen by God because, number one, he was available and he was willing. He would do what God told him to do, even to the point of going around 3 years in almost his birthday suit, if it was not his birthday suit, just to preach a vision of how the Egyptians were going to be captured and carried off into Assyria. And so we see that he was this area was going to be in constant turmoil. Seems like the Middle East is always in constant turmoil and has been since the beginning of time. And he talks about Elam and Media. They were defeated in 639 by the Assyrians, and then later, the end of groaning. We don't really know what that means. It's a saying that it could mean a couple of things. That the end of groanings could mean because you're dead and you're no longer groaning because you're dead. Or it could mean that the end of groaning was being under the Babylonians now had thrust off. If they're talking about, later on, the Babylonians had thrust off, or they had defeated Assyria, and so now they were no longer groaning under the domination of Assyria, and that Babylon became a world-class empire in 605, and then that's what the first time that they besieged Jerusalem, and they didn't totally capture it, but they kind of overran it, and that's when the prophet Daniel and his three pals there were carried off into captivity in 605. And then later on, it was like a few years later, like 586, when Jerusalem actually fell, the temple was destroyed. To give you, more dates there that probably swimming around in your head. So the go up, the part there where it says go up Elam and besiege Media, that's is the command to Babylon's enemies to attack her. And we don't know whether Elam and Media are the treacherous ones that they're talking about, traitors betray and plunderers plunder. But like I said, there's so much stuff here that we don't really know who he's talking about there, and there are several theories as to what that would be. So going on, and again, go ahead and stop me if you have any questions, because some of this stuff is kind of out there, and it's just hard to understand in many cases. Verse 3 says, therefore, my body is filled with pain, pains which have taken hold of me like the pangs of a woman in labor. I am bewildered by what I hear, terrified by what I see. My heart is bewildered. Terror overwhelms me. The twilight I long for has been turned into trembling. So the violence of this vision that had come to Isaiah is almost more than he can bear, and he's terrified of it. He expresses his dismay of the vision in physical terms, like abdominal cramps. I mean, physically, he was physically sick, and I don't know if any of you have ever had stresses of whatever, the job or family or finances or something that are so strong on you that it makes you physically sick, and it certainly can. I had a commanding officer on a ship one time. I was the executive officer and he was the commanding officer, and he was such a rascal that every Sunday afternoon, when I knew I would have to be going back into the ship on Monday, I would start being physically ill, sick at my stomach, and all that goes along with that. It was just one of those things that happened, and the only time in my Coast Guard career that that happened, but this guy prided himself with how many people he could ruin their careers, and he told me that. So stresses like that can make you very ill. So, and he says that his stresses were like a woman in labor, and so for guys, we don't know what that's like. We can only look at it and surmise what it may be like, but that's what Isaiah thought his was, and so he's said his heart his heart palpitated, or what would we call it today? I don't know, a tachycardia, arrhythmia, heart attack, and I know this one of the words that we just used to toss around when I was doing investigations and someone died was that the cause of death was a myocardial infarction. And I just thought that was okay. That's kind of a fun thing to say, but not very fun for the person.
Or here, I'll say this, or indigestion from anxiety so bad that it feels like a heart attack. And I mean and it can be very, very bad. I know someone who pulled over and called 911 because they were so bad off. Yeah.
Sure. Angina can just take away your breath, and yeah, kidney stones. I've heard that same thing, Rachel, where women say that they had kidney stones that were much, much worse than labor pains. And I've known men the same thing, that one of my classmates at the academy had kidney stones so bad that eventually he was retired from a medical retirement from the Coast Guard because they just couldn't control it, and he was out so much, but he suffered tremendously. So just Isaiah was saying that he was really suffering from what he saw. The stress of it was so bad. And you could say, well, why is he getting stressed out over Babylon? Because Babylon was not a true friend of Judah. And certainly in 700 BC, and then later on, Babylon was a oppressor. They destroyed the temple. So Walter Kaiser, who's an author and scholar, theologian, who I've sat under his teaching, and he's a very nice, kindly old gentleman. I really enjoyed his teaching, but he suggested that this language was a rhetorical device used by the prophets to kind of underline the severity of their pronouncements. So it was kind of a linguistic construct that would just increase the idea of the gloom and doom. And I don't know if that's totally true, but that was the opinion of Dr. Walter Kaiser. And so it said that the visual and the audible revelation that God had given him over this vision was just enough to just shake him to his very core. And his heart, of course, he just thought he was going to die from that. So, and and again, we were having trouble. We don't really know what how the dates work out on this, whether it was an early time, say the early by Isaiah, the 8th century, which is the 700s, and or if it was in the 6th century, which would have been the 500s in that area. We don't really know. I mean, they could be either one, really. I mean, and the way you look at these things. So, verse 5 says, "Set the table, spread out the cloth, eat, drink. Rise up, you princes, oil the shield. Okay, so now this one, the explanation for that is all over the place. And Dr. Oswart, the guy who's mainly the book that I'm reading for the textbook, and I think Rich Withers, when he was in seminary, said that Oswalt was that was the gold standard of studying Isaiah. If I'm not mistaken, that's what you said, Rich. So I'm quoting you, and if I got it wrong, pardon me.
Yes, you got it.
Okay. And he is. I mean, I look at his stuff, and then I watch him on YouTube because he's still alive, and watching his he did a year-long thing of Isaiah, like I'm doing. Only he's a real big theologian and all that kind of stuff. And me, I just read the theologians, and that's what I have to do. But anyway, he said that he thought that this verse, it could point out or could describe the final feast of Belshazzar and his fall to the Persians, the Medo-Persians. And you'll remember that story where they're partying, and they even brought out the implements from the temple. They said, "Here, let's bring out the bowls and the goblets and the plates and all that that we stole from the Israelites in Jerusalem in 586, and then we'll drink from them and do all sorts of stuff." And that's when the finger wrote on the wall, and basically in English it says, "You've been found wanting. You've been weighed in the balance and found wanting." So that very night, then Babylon fell to the Medo-Persians, and so Oswalt thinks that it could possibly be that. Then other people say, well, no, this could be when the forces of Merodach Baladan came down toward Israel, and they had a meeting, that ambassadorial type of meetings with them and the Babylonian, with Israel and the Babylonians, and how that they were eating, drinking, feasting, and at the same time the Babylonians were trying to figure out how they're going to best Israel too. So there was a lot of that palace intrigue going on. So there's some that said that was what it would be, and so then others, they talk about others say, well, they try to put a different spin on it, that basically what they're looking at is, okay, these people are eating, drinking, and making merry just like they did right before the flood, and the Sodom and Gomorrah people and so forth. And so that's what they're trying to make it more of just a general humanitarian commentary, that's just what people do, and so God is going to punish them for that. And so we don't really know. I mean, it's again, it just depends on what theologian that you're talking about, what they say. But then there was another part there where it says about the rise up, you princes, oil the shield. And there's one of the commentators said that what that meant, that a shield was that was a metaphor for the leader of a nation, because he was the one that protected them. He was their shield. And so he was saying that telling the princes of the land to rise up and change the shield, get rid of whoever the oppressor, whoever their emperor was. And again, that would depend on what part of time in history you're talking about, who the emperor might be. Then there's another one that talks about oiling the shield as being a call to battle, where they would many times the shields were they covered a wooden shield. The shields were made out of wood, and then they covered them with a real thick like a bull's hide, which is very, very thick and very tough. And when you put it onto the shield and make it and dry it all out and everything, it can be just extremely hard and could stop lots of arrows and spears and stones and so forth. But on the back side of it, where they had that leather on it and you're trying to hold on to it, that shield could get so hard that it would just chafe the guy's arm to the point where it's very uncomfortable. So they would say, oil the shields, get them soft and pliable on the backside so that you can hold your shield properly. Don't know. It's just this particular chapter has a lot of those don't knows in it. So, but the idea here in this verse is that the verbs that are there are infinitives, and so that gives them that sense of immediacy and activity, and you got to do it right now, that sort of thing. And so it's that just gives them that whole idea of this is going to happen like right away. All right, so verse 6, for Adonai has said to me, go, post a watchman, let him declare what he sees. When he sees a chariot with a pair of horsemen, riders on donkeys, riders on camels, let him pay attention, very close attention. So now the scene here, it shifts back from Babylon to Judah. And so in his vision, Isaiah is charged to post a watchman that's supposed to watch the eastern horizon for the signs of Babylon's fall. Now, virtually all the commentators are agreed that the watchman is Isaiah himself, and then he's also the guy that's listening too. And so this has given rise to a fairly elaborate theological theory of a dual consciousness in the prophet, whereby he's both the watchman and the listener to the watchman's message. And again, Dr. Kaiser had pointed out that no, this was a visionary experience, not an ordinary day-to-day event. So this was something that was out of the ordinary, extraordinary. It was, again, visionary, and not something that you could just buy a ticket and go see at the theater. This was, if you've ever had very vivid dreams that you just really alive and really different dreams. I mean, then you would understand how that some of these dreams could, you're here and you're there, but you're both places and you're neither place, and so forth. So anyway, we don't know. It's again one of those things that's very difficult to understand, and the theologians are by no means agreed. But again, this is this concept of prophetic psychology and the things that are going to be coming, and then so forth. Though that sort of stuff is picked up in New Testament times by Yeshua in his discourse on the last days. Probably Matthew 24 was that chapter is a good example that these signs are evidences of God working throughout history, and he does, and he did, and is bringing everything together for the final consummation, the end of that long red thread that runs from, salvation that runs from Genesis all the way through Revelation, and even still today is unfolding. But there's, in the end times, there's going to be, Yeshua said, there are going to be various cataclysms, earthquakes and stuff in nature, and also in human society. We can see that in many cases the earth is acting in funny ways, and we certainly know that people are acting in funny ways, and funny strange, not funny haha. And so and that even kind of goes over into the body of Messiah and the believers in the churches and even in the synagogues and so forth, where you see different things and people coming up with different theories, and again, sometimes these theories are so over the top, but the author of those theories swears that, well, this is fresh revelation from the Lord that God gave them because of whatever reason, and that had never been shared with anyone in the history of mankind. And so whenever I hear something like that, I pretty much disregard it, because I go back to what Solomon said in the Bible. It says, there is nothing new under the sun. And so when somebody comes up with something that does not purport to what the Bible says, then obviously we cannot allow ourselves to be a part of that. So now here in verse 6, we see that God is referred to, and depending on your translation, as sovereign, or Adonai Svaot, which is the God of the Lord of hosts and so forth. But it's a powerful, and I think that I'd have to look. I just don't remember the Hebrew, whether it was the Yod He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton, or something different. So in the affairs of the world, Isaiah's sovereign, but he's also Babylon's sovereign. Why? Because he's the Lord of the earth, everything. He's sovereign of everything and everybody. And so he sends a watchman to his post, and Babylon to its doom. And under this sovereignty, the watchman has no choice but to what? To report what he sees, even though it would be painful and unpleasant. In fact, that is just why he is posted up there, not for his own sake, but to discover interesting intelligence, to give a warning, to pass on information for the sake of the people. So in verse 7, the watchman is given something to watch for. What? A procession of warriors riding in pairs on horses, donkeys, and camels. And so Dr. Kaiser thought that this meant only a caravan, and just about, he's the Lone Ranger on that one, because everyone else thinks that it was probably some kind of a military cavalcade, parade, military incursion. And so, we just don't know. We know that when, it could be that the Persian army under Xenophon, he advanced by twos, and he used donkeys and camels to kind of unsettle the enemy, because they were looking for horsemen, chariots, infantry, and so forth. And then here came some dudes with riding donkeys and camels. Just kind of made them all wonder what in the world is going on. So again, we have to stress this visionary nature of the experience. Just it's a vision, and it's not something that in this point you can take absolutely literally with any measure of confidence, because it could point to different things. That doesn't mean that the Bible is not correct, but it just means that we don't understand what all they are saying. If it was the Persian army and Xenophon, he never did appear outside of Jerusalem. And so this is looking at Babylon's attackers. I don't know. The watchman here, Isaiah, is not given. He's not told the meaning of the vision. He's just told to pay very attention, and when the sign does appear. So then he cried out like a lion. Upon the watchtower, Adonai, I stand continually in the daytime and stay at my post every night. Look, here comes a chariot of men with a pair of horsemen. Then one answered and said, Fallen, fallen is Babylon. All the images of her gods are broken on the ground. So these verses, the watchman speaks, first telling of his perseverance and staying with it day and night. He's the watchman day and night. And so maybe it's a little bit of an impatience, but it also just can mean that for a good long time now, he's been watching for the appearances. And so, again, just depending on how you date these things, it could be that he's waiting for, a relatively short time, maybe 8, 10, 12, 20 years, something like that. And at the other side of it, he could be waiting for something like the second coming or the destruction of the attempted destruction of Israel in the end times, which is 2,000 years and counting. So, however long the wait, though, eventually the light does dawn, and there's something really abrupt in the Hebrew that says hine ze, and that means here it is. It's now. And so that's the kind of feeling that you get. We waited. Oh my gosh, here it is. And the riders are coming. So sometimes when you're on watch militarily, it's you talk about being a watchman or a lookout or something. So you got hours and hours of just horrible boredom, and then when you do see something, it's punctuated with a few seconds of at least interest, and at the worst terror. So anyway, but he sees something, and they're a little bit different. They seem to have a little bit different description, and the wording is mostly the same, but it's not. It's the same, but it's different. And so they say, well, this could be two processions, a military procession and more of a civilian procession. And we really don't know what that's going to mean. And then there's we talk about and one answered. We don't know who answered, but we can just pretty much say that the person doing the answering there was Isaiah himself. And then when they say fallen Babylon, that the way that's written and the duplication of fallen, it has that air of finality to it, that nothing is going to stop this. So that mighty city Babylon, it's going to be destroyed. It's going to be gone, and so nothing is going to stop it. And the destructions of war was just devastated. We've seen well, not in our lifetime, but in the lifetimes of our parents, things that London, Dresden, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the total devastation, and I've been to both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and walked around those places and seen some of the monuments that are there, and just to get an idea of, wow, the total devastation of those places. It's amazing. So that we can things like that happen, but human beings, being what we are, we pick up the pieces and kind of rise like a phoenix, and here we are. We got the great cities again, and life just goes on. Verse 10. O my people, crushed on the threshing floor, what I heard from Adonai Zvaot, King of Israel, I have declared to you. So this verse here could be taken in a couple of different ways. It can be either an encouragement that they haven't destroyed you yet, or it could be a word of regret that had you just listened. And so it just depends on where you think in the timeline this prophecy took place, or what Isaiah is talking about in this place, whether he's talking about the 8th century or the 6th century BCE. So again, that's one of those things that you just have to look at, try to cipher it out on your own. And in the verse they're talking about, we get back up there to it. Crushed on the threshing floor, and that if you've ever seen threshing floors that out there, I should have put a picture on it, but it is they'll have an oxen and a big heavy wooden sled, and they just go around in a circle, and it rolls over that the grain and pops the chaff away from it, the husk off of the grain. And it's once you've done that, you can never put the husk back on. You can never put the grain all back together again. So it's final. When you're crushed like that, it's final. So that's with what they're talking about there. And anyway, going on, verse 11, the burden of Dumah, one calls to me from Seir, watchman, what is left of the night? Watchman, what is left of the night? So this particular okay, there's the mountain of Seir, and you can tell where they've got people over the eons of time have dug things into the wall and in the sandstone. And just as an idea of where Dumah and Seir are, Dumah is in Saudi Arabia. It was an oasis there that and on a major trade route, because you have to have an oasis every once in a while because of the trade routes in there, and it is one of the major thoroughfares of Saudi Arabia even today. And then Mount Seir, and that is in present day Jordan, just on the border of Jordan and Israel. Okay, so again, we don't really know what's going on. Here's another picture of Dumah. There's some of these castles there, and interestingly enough, now Dumah is a kind of a center for wind generated energy in Saudi Arabia. Now, who would think of why in the world they need to have wind energy when they got all the oil that they could ever use? So. But anyway, these verses here, verse 11, it talks of the Arabian allies of Babylon, and Dumah is now Dumat al-Jandal, and there's a city around it, but you can still see some of the ruins. name Mount Seir didn't change. It's the same thing. It's in Jordan. And so again, this oracle it could refer to either the 8th century or the 6th century. Either one fits okay, and neither one is a perfect fit, but neither one of them can be rejected because of a fatal flaw either. And so it's interesting. I was reading through this thing that when we saw the word in verse 6, the word watchman, when he says, I want you to appoint a watchman for the wall, he uses the word hamzapah, and there I've spelled it for you. And but then when and that's the watchman up on the gate, up on the walls. But then when he uses the word watchman later on in verse 11, he uses a completely different word, even a different root for this word. It's shamar, and it probably points a little bit more to the guy that's the beat cop. He's the one that's just walking the streets of the city and just rattling doors, checking this out and looking at that, and that's kind of what the watchman is for him. Whereas the other one is one up in the guard tower. He's the one with the big binoculars looking out there. They didn't have binoculars back in those days, but anyway, he's out there looking. And they might put guys up there that have really, really good eyesight to do that sort of thing. So it was just interesting to me that they would have two separate Hebrew words to describe, and then the English, it just comes out watchman. So, and I don't know why the English is different than there. Why couldn't they have said beat cop, except that they hadn't been invented yet? All right, so the verse 12, it says the morning comes, the watchman said, morning comes, yet also it is night. If you would inquire, come back again. So the guard's answer here is, again, one that there's no real clear answer to it. And there are three interpretations, and it says morning is coming, another night will follow. Another one says morning will come. It will be morning for some, will be night for others. I don't know. And then the other one is while morning will come, it will still be dark for that person and maybe many others. So you can't really have, there's nothing here that you could really nail down. This is really jello here, and you can't nail it down. But what we can say here is that Isaiah, he just couldn't give up. He couldn't give the people a total picture of hope, and yet he couldn't give them a picture of just hopeless doom and gloom. Either way, that there's going to be some good, the good news and the bad news kind of a thing. And you just hope the good news is far better than the bad news that's going to accompany it. And so the bit about where it says come back again. Now, again, these are two blunt imperatives in the verbiage there, that it's the early, even in the Targum, the picture there, what the Targum being the Jewish, what would you say, paraphrase of the scriptures, so that common people could understand the scriptures, kind of like what we have with the Living Bible, Living New Testament, so that common people like you and me can, or certainly like me anyway, can understand the Bible, the King James version, where sometimes it's difficult to understand. But the Targums were written in many cases in Aramaic, which was the language that everyone spoke, and not the Hebrew of the Bible. But the Targum talked about this sometime, that return meant repent, time to repent. All right. The burden of Arabia. Okay. In the desert brush of Arabia, you will stay for the night, you caravans of Dedanites. It's kind of funny because in the King James Version, they pronounce the Hebrew word Ya'ar as forest, and it doesn't really mean forest. It means more like big brush, like we would have out here in South Texas where we live. You wouldn't call it a forest of Yopon holly. There's something that gets up 10, 12 feet tall, and that's about it. You wouldn't call that a forest. And so there are no forests in Saudi Arabia, period. So it's either sarcasm on Isaiah's part, which really this doesn't call for, or that's just what he was talking about, this a real big bushy area of Arabia, or around an oasis, there's going to be a better vegetation. And so they're talking about these when it says the desert brush, it could mean being off the beaten path, taking an alternate route, and that could be because of war. Like if refugees are crowding the main roads, or that they've taken an alternate route to foil the plans of robbers. And so, again, the identity of the Dedanites, it's just all over the place. Just to ask a scholar and you'll get two answers. So, verse 14: to him who is thirsty, bring water, inhabitants of the land of Tema. Meet the fugitive with food, for they fled from swords, or drawn sword, from bent bow and distress of war. So, this idea of bread meant, obviously bread for the refugees. And in 539, the supporters of Nabonidus they would have been, that was the Babylonian king, they would have been pushed westward across the desert tracts toward Tema, and that's the only place that they could have gotten support. So during the Assyrian period, each of a number of attacks into Arabia also displaced people and put them on the road. Tiglath-Pileser in the third in 738, Sargon the second in 715, and possibly then later on in 710 also. And then, of course, later Sennacherib in 703 and 689. So basically they're talking about that the people, when you see people in need, these refugees, give them water and give them food, is what Isaiah is telling them to do. And let me go on with the last ones, because we're over the time limit anyway. For thus Adonai said to me, within a year, as with the years of a hired worker, all the glory of Kedar will cease, and the remainder of the number of archers, the mighty men of the sons of Kedar, will be few, for Adonai, the God of Israel, has spoken. All right. So what they're talking about is that within a year from this prophecy, the economy of Arabia would collapse, and that their army would be few. And it was kind of interesting to look at the Hebrew there that he was using. The glory, the kavod, the heaviness. Kavod means heavy. The heaviness of their economy, where it's good, full, and rich and powerful, it would collapse under the kobed, which is a similar word but different usage, the kobed of battle. And so it was just an interesting Hebraic twist of wording there, the kavod and the kobed. but the Arabian armies of Saudi Arabia, but it's not Saudi Arabia at that point, but the Arabs would be destroyed, and or decimated anyway, not totally destroyed, because it said there will still be a remainder, a remnant. All right. So anyway, that gets us up through chapter 21. Are there any comments or questions before we close up tonight? So, and nothing? Nobody?
I do have a question, but not about this chapter.
Okay. What you got?
Okay, so how do I present this? Is there any archaeological findings to prove the Exodus truly happened? Because there's a lot of scholars out there that are disputing. There's a lot of there are a lot of people disputing that when the Exodus took place and everything.
Oh yeah, there certainly is. You go to Jabbar al-Lawz in Saudi Arabia, and you can see the evidence of the Israeli or the Israelites encampment around Mount Sinai, which is where Mount Sinai is the mountain Jabbar al-Lawz in Saudi Arabia. The top of the mountain is still blackened from where God was there, and the fire was so intense. And you look down around the bottom of the altar of the mountain, and there's evidence of a huge stone split right in two, and then a water course that just flows for miles, a dry water course that flows right from there. Now, why would there be a water course from a huge rock that just split out and gone out? There are carvings all around the mountain, various ones that, in some cases, they are a little more than Kilroy was here.
Understood. Do you have a source that you could email me or something? Because I like to present that this.
Okay, you could look up Joel Richardson. He's an author that has been there, done that, and he's written an excellent.
You said Joel, Joel.
Joel. Richardson. Okay, and there are, as Leonard pointed out, there are chariot wheels in the Red Sea that they found, and in that a lot of times things are preserved in the ocean, especially it wouldn't be the wood of the wheels, but it would be the metal rims and the gold, because a lot of them were gilded, and so you'd see that. And Leonard has pictures. I've seen the pictures of it too. I don't have them on my just to where I know exactly where they are in all of my picture banks, but I have seen those also.
Okay.